Welcome to Beyond the Coverage. I'm Chris Horner. Today's edition, I want to cover the process of Primož Roglič and what he learned at Dauphiné this last week of racing. Remember, he joined Bora-Hansgrohe this year in 2024 after leaving Jumbo-Visma last season. They won 3 Grand Tours. Primož Roglič won the Giro, Jonas the Tour de France, the American Sepp Kuss, of course, won the Vuelta a España. Now, when he joined over in Bora-Hansgrohe, he has said since Paris-Nice in his interviews all the time that the main process throughout the beginning part of the season and all the way up to the Tour de France is the process of learning your teammates. It's the process of learning how the team works together, how it gels together, how it moves, how they do their work together, who's doing what, who's capable of doing what. But Primož Roglič, this is 2024, and I raced against Primož Roglič back in 2015 at Azerbaijan, so I know he was a pro back then with a small team. Then he came over to Jumbo-Visma, and he's been racing 10 seasons, this being his 10th season, at least that I know of because I raced with him in 2015. So he's a 10-year, at least, experienced pro, and now he's done a ton of Tour de France's. He's done 3 Vueltas that he's won. He's done the Giro d'Italia that he's won. He's done the Giro in the past. He's done a ton of races, ton of Grand Tours. His experience at this point in time with as much racing as he's had and with the experience of going through Jumbo-Visma and learning how the team works together should already have him set up when he comes into Bora-Hansgrohe to understand how to race. When you go into Paris-Nice and you start the beginning of your season as Primož Roglič, you do not need to figure out the process of your team. At 10 years of a professional, and in your 20s, for sure, you have to figure that out. It took me a long time. I was a knucklehead throughout my whole 20s. It took me a little bit later in my 20s when I went over and started riding with Mercury after I came back from FDJ. Went over with Mercury. We dominated domestically in the US. We went over to Europe, won a little bit over in Europe with Gord Fraser and a couple other guys. It was a fantastic team, but I knew in my later 20s and certainly in my early 30s when I started riding with Mercury and stuff, how to race properly tactics. I didn't need to know coming into Paris-Nice in 2024, if I'm Primož Roglič, how the team is going to work together. You need to learn how they're going to function outside of the race. But in the race, you do not need to learn that. You know Jai Hindley is a Giro d'Italia winner. So you know he's going to be either your last or second to last Super Domestique when you're going up the last climbs. You know Vlasov is either going to be first or second at last guy with Jai Hindley. How they flip around is up to them. But you know Primož Roglič if you're coming in because one's a Grand Tour winner and Vlasov's won some races. And he goes top 10s in Grand Tours. Vlasov is a solid rider. Garrett and I have argued many times. He's sitting over on just behind the camera. And we've argued many times before Dauphiné started about who would be the last lead-out guy going up the final climbs, leading out the Super Domestique for Primož Roglič. Would it be Vlasov? Would it be Jai Hindley? You have to figure out goofy little details like that. But that's not even an important detail if you're Primož Roglič coming in the race. All you need to know is that one of them's going to be there. One of them's going to get you 5, 6, 7 kilometers up the last climb. One's going to do the beginning. One's going to do the end. If you're really lucky, Sobrero, you got to figure out a little bit how many times will he be there when the last climb starts and how far will he go up the last climb. But the other guys don't need to figure that out. They're going to be there to get you halfway up the last climb. Hopefully they get you a little bit deeper. But when you got a Giro d'Italia winner like Jai Hindley and Vlasov, with what those 2 riders are getting paid, they should get you deep into the last climb. And then Primož Roglič has to go to work and earn his paycheck. The rest of the stuff is all off the bike when we're talking about the process every time he's given that interview. When we look at yesterday's stage, where Primož Roglič blew up, where Vlasov blew up, where Jai Hindley, he pulled a little bit too hard, where Bob Jungels, why was he pulling on the front with Mads Pedersen? Okay, Mads started pulling at 30 kilometers ago. Before that, it's all Ineos. Bora-Hansgrohe cannot control what Ineos want to do. They cannot control what Mads Pedersen is going to do. Once Ineos brings that group and they hold that breakaway up there of 9, 10 riders, once they hold it at 2 minutes, 15 seconds, 2 minutes, once they pull off the front with 30K to go, Mads Pedersen gets on the front. Bora-Hansgrohe cannot control what Mads Pedersen does, okay? That wasn't needing a crystal ball. You didn't need to race and do races with Mads Pedersen to know that he might do that if he's still there for Ciccone. So we'd seen it in earlier stages even. Primož Roglič, at that point in time, wearing the race leader's jersey, he puts Bob Jungels to ride on the front with Mads Pedersen. This is where things start to go all wrong. if Primož Roglič and Vlasov know their legs aren't good at that moment, it's 30 kilometers to go, they should have some kind of feeling that maybe they're not good. Now, if it's a calorie deficit, it could be different because sometimes if they got the calories wrong, once they start the last climb, they can both be bonking. That's a problem. But at the moment, when you're looking at the break up the road and they got 2 minutes and Mads Pedersen's getting on the front, Bob Jungels is riding on the front with Mads Pedersen, that's the first mistake. The best rider in that front group for Bora Hansgrohe was at 7 minutes. That rider is Marc Soler from UAE Team Emirates. At 7 minutes, he's not a threat on the general classification. You don't have to ride with Mads Pedersen. You can leave him up there, start the last climb, 9.5 kilometers to go. If that break is going to stay away, all of a sudden, you don't have Ciccone attacking at the bottom of the climb trying to win the stage. When Ciccone's attacking early, he's attacking early because he knows that if he can get a gap, he's 3 minutes down on general classification, maybe Bora Hansgrohe won't chase him because he was riding strong and he was clearly climbing with some of the best riders in the world at Dauphine. So if he can get a gap because he's 3 minutes down on general classification, attacking early for Ciccone, that was a good tactical move. Later he made some knucklehead moves when he's pulling with Primož Roglič as Roglič is getting dropped. But at the moment, that's a good move. I liked it. He stayed out there for about 3 kilometers. The next mistake, though, from Bora Hansgrohe's Primož Roglič, and Primož Roglič wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. As I told you, 10 years experience, winning 4 Grand Tours throughout his career. At that moment when Ciccone attacks, and we look at Jai Hindley on the front after Sobrero blows, Jai Hindley's pulling a little bit too hard. He comes up from the right side, gets a little gap, realizes he's got to slow down. We see Primož Roglič coming up to the back wheel there of Jai Hindley. At that moment, if you think you're fantastic and you want to win the stage, that was a great tactic to do from Jai Hindley. Start pulling as hard as you can, do damage control, keep Ciccone close. The breakaway's all getting caught from Ciccone. We're at 7.5 kilometers to go. And at that moment, if Primož Roglič is like, I got the best legs here in the race, I'm going to light guys up. I know the process of my team. I have been racing with them for 7 stages already. Jai Hindley's doing a great job. I'm going to stay on his wheel. That's perfect if you feel fantastic. But remember, he doesn't have to pull back Ciccone. He doesn't have to go that hard. Other teams can start racing back there. It's the last final mountain stage here at Dauphiné. So if they want to win stages, i.e. Ineos, as we saw in the interview from De Plus, saying that they want to win a stage, they want to try to get up on the general classification into the podium with Carlos Rodriguez, you know they're going to go somewhere. So Primož Roglič, when he's sitting there on Jai Hindley's wheel, he can tell Jai Hindley, hey, back off, ease up. You don't have to stay with the tactic of we're all dominant Bora Hansgrohe. You can go at that moment and still hit the abort button on the original plan that they had in the writers' meeting in the bus, because I'm sure the director sportif, no matter how many times Primož Roglič said Dauphiné doesn't matter, the director sportif from Bora Hansgrohe, he knows it matters. He knows that winning Dauphiné after they get Red Bull sponsor coming on for the Tour de France with Primož Roglič going into the Tour de France as the winner of Dauphiné and the new sponsor of Red Bull coming on. That's huge. So no matter how many times you heard Primož Roglič say Dauphiné doesn't matter, it's only about the process. It's about the process. That is a mistake because Bora Hansgrohe have a new sponsor coming on. And the big hype around Primož Roglič and Tadej Pogačar battling at the Tour de France after one Slovenian won the Giro and Bora Hansgrohe, the other Slovenian, wins Dauphiné. That's huge. So I assume in the writers' meeting that the director sportif was saying, hey, we want to win this stage with Primož Roglič. We want to win 3 stages here at Dauphiné. We want to win it with the yellow jersey. We want to come in and finish this off and dominate everyone. And if he wins the last mountain stage, most likely he's going to win the KOM jersey, most likely points jersey, which he did win, and of course the yellow jersey. And then you start going over to Tour de France with this hype around the team. Now we start going into the process though. I don't know how much Primož Roglič learned of the process when we're going up this last climb a week into Dauphiné, and he's got Jai Hindley on the front who blows once De Plus throws in attack. Then we start looking at Vlasov back there, and you can see immediately that Vlasov is suffering as he's leaning over like this on his bike, trying to get back up to the wheel of De Plus. At that moment, if you're Primož Roglič, you should be able to read in the process from other riders that you've raced with throughout your 10 years of racing experience that Vlasov's hurting at that moment. So if you're hurting too, you're going to have to back off, have Vlasov back off. You let De Plus go up the road because now De Plus is still 2 minutes down on general classification. Instead, Vlasov is still trying to close the gap. Vlasov is still riding 100%. I always look at my power meter. If I see my power meter and I'm Vlasov or Primož Roglič even, and my power meter's reading 400 plus watts. I know, just like I did on the angler when I was racing against Vincenzo Nibali, when he was attacking me, I just looked at my power meter. I stayed at about 400 watts. I knew there's no way Vincenzo Nibali is going to do 600 watts up L'Angliru all the way from where he's attacking me 7, 8 different times to the summit at that moment, because we still had 3, 4, 5 kilometers to go when he was attacking me. So I just looked at my power. I looked at my power. I stayed at 400. I said, hey, there's no way someone's going to average more than 400 watts up this climb. If I'm 136 pounds, could have been 135, maybe 134 if there wasn't enough water in the body at that moment. But for sure that morning I was 136. So at 136 pounds doing 400 watts, I realistically looked at my power meter and said, there's no way Nibali can hold this power. I don't need to accelerate. I just need to continue doing 400 watts. I did that. I won the Vuelta a España. Yesterday, Primož Roglič did not do that. He had Vlasov going full gas. He still did not see the signs from Vlasov when he's throwing the chicken arms out there, when he's looking back, when he's blowing. And then finally Vlasov blows and pulls off to the side. Now, why did I bring up the Vlasov? Because later we see Vlasov going pretty good. He'll finish just 10 seconds behind Primož Roglič at the finish of that stage on Remco Evenepoel's wheel, which tells me that Vlasov wasn't really that bad. It just tells me he didn't have the big acceleration that DePlouse had. But again, DePlouse is more than 2 minutes down on general classification. He wasn't a threat. You could back the throttle off. You can abort. So everything that I looked at this year's at Dauphiné, once we see Primož Roglič struggling back there, after we see Carlos Rodriguez attack, after we see Jorgensen bridge across the gap with DePlouse, after we see G bridge across. If we look at Primož Roglič when he's struggling, he's looking back over his shoulder at Ciccone. Once Ciccone comes through, that's the knucklehead move that I was talking about with Ciccone. That the beginning part of the attack was good. This moment when you see Ciccone on the front chasing with his jersey all zipped down and you see him chasing, pulling Primož Roglič, they're only 6, 8 seconds behind the group up in front. Ciccone's got a lot of speed, especially one big acceleration, and we had a dip coming at 2.5 kilometers to go. So if Ciccone just said to Roglič, nope, I don't have to close this gap. There's no way I don't need to close this gap. He sits on his wheel, maybe jumps across. Primož Roglič, if Ciccone had used that tactic, probably would have lost the Dauphiné without the help of Ciccone, because Ciccone pulled early. Then he also pulled over 2.5 kilometers on the descent when we saw him as Primož Roglič pulled off to the right. That saved the Dauphiné right there for Primož Roglič. And when we get into the Tour de France, it's a whole different spectrum when you're talking about Red Bull coming on. If the Slovenian had lost Dauphiné on the last day and got dropped by a bunch of young kids that finished up on stage 8 racing correctly, one Jorgensen, he raced a pretty marvelous race with the exception of that little communication gap he had with Thies Benoot when the climb started proper and Thies Benoot was drilling it without Jorgensen on his wheel. That was kind of a little ridiculous, almost knuckleheadism, because they didn't learn the process of, well, there's no Jonas Vingegaard here on this last final mountains climb here, so I don't want to go at the bottom because Jorgensen doesn't want to do that tactic. But that is a perfect tactic for Thies Benoot when, of course, Jorgensen would have wanted him to do that. Now, we go into Primož Roglič again. As he comes over, he crosses the line, he keeps, of course, the Dauphiné by 8 seconds. But what did he learn? What was the process that he learned? When I look at it from the Chesterfield, guys, he made a lot of mistakes. When you look at his crashes, I got to believe one of them is his own. We look at stage 5 crash. Of course, that one, no one can be blamed for that. 70 kilometers an hour, wet, slippery road. Everybody crashes, no big deal. But when we start looking at other crashes from Primož Roglič, his first one we didn't have on camera, but it sounded like he crashed alone and just went off the road going too fast, not paying attention. Either way, it sounded like he crashed solo, which means he crashed himself. Okay, that process he needs to work on. I explained that earlier in the videos on the butterfly effect, where he just needs to see in the future a little bit, see what's coming, and anticipate how the peloton's going to react. Because the process of learning how the peloton reacts is the same as learning how your teammates work. Once they come into a bridge down the descent and it starts to narrow up, when we saw him hit the brakes hard and that chain reaction went back there and we saw Chris Hoppe crash, that's the process that he's still not learning. That's the racecraft that he's still not learning. And when we look here at Dauphiné, when it's all said and done, I don't think Primož Roglič had learned anything from his team that he wouldn't or should not have already known. Like, he should have known that stuff. Absolutely should have known that Vlasov is capable of going up the last climb. Jai Hindley is capable of going up the last climb. If you gave me his lungs right now and his legs, I can jump off this chair right now, go into any bike race, and understand any professional team that you put me on. I could tell you, this rider's going to be there. These are their 3 climbers. Sobrero's a climber. Vlasov's a climber. Jai Hindley's a climber. Those will be my last 3 guys. I don't need to use those guys right now. I need to use Mark Marco Haller, I need to use Nico Dins. I need to use those early, and I need to keep my other 3 climbers fresh. Bob Jungels is the in-between guy. If we're coming into stage 8 and I'm not feeling good, because maybe he just dieted too much before. Maybe he just kept the calories a little thin before because he's still trying to drop half a kilo, not a few kilos, but maybe he's trying to drop just some small little percentage before the Tour de France. So maybe they are using Dauphiné as a place to not only train, not only race, not only learn the process of your teammates, but maybe they were trying to diet too. And then he has to predict that when you go into the last climb that, hey, we're all dieted yesterday, or we all crashed earlier on stage 5. Maybe everyone's not 100%. Maybe we don't have to bring that break back. Maybe we don't have to put Bob Jungels on the front chasing with Mads Pedersen, because it'll make the last climb faster and harder, and then things can go wrong. That's the process that he should be picking up in his racecraft, not the process of will Jai Hindley be there, will Vlasov be there, how far will how far will Sobrero go into the final climb at the beginning of the final climb. Those are the things that you don't need to know. I can go on any team and know that right away. I was racing back in the day with Saturn in 2003. We had a massive team. We're talking about 7, 10 hitters on that team. When I went into the team right away, I looked around. We had classic guys there that with Tom Danielson that you knew was going to win. Nathan O'Neill you knew was going to be a big hitter. Myself, and I went right away to those 2 guys and I said, hey, we cannot be fighting each other. We have to split the wins up. We have to divide it. When you started looking at the rest of the team, we had hitters with Ivan Dominguez, the sprinter. You knew he was going to get every opportunity for the field sprints. And then we had Mark McCormick, who, when he comes on form, once we start getting a little bit past the spring part of the season, Mark McCormick was an ace. He was fantastic. He had speed. He had power. He was what we see of like a Mads Pedersen domestically racing here in the U.S. He could do a ton, and he can win all over the place. So we all had to communicate together. We all had to help each other out. And I knew that right away. I didn't need the process of coming into Team Saturn and going, how does everyone going to work? When you come in as a leader, as Primož Roglič did to start the Dauphiné, you don't need the process. You already know. You have won 4 Grand Tours. You have won everything on the calendar. You are the number 2, number 3 best rider in the world. At this moment, he's number 3 behind Tadej Pogačar and Jonas Vingegaard. But I believe if he learned his racecraft a little bit better, he would easily be up there and going battling against Tadej Pogačar left and right throughout their careers. Instead, he's number 3 because he doesn't have his racecraft. Another experience, once I left Saturn where they had hitters all over the place, I went over to Webcor. I started racing with Webcor, and when they signed me, it was myself and Charles Dion, the sprinter, another rider that could get over some climbs and still sprint. I knew when I signed with that team, I said, hey, there's no way we can win big stage races domestically here in the U.S. because guys can't get me to the finish line. Once we started racing, we're at our 2nd, 3rd race of the season. We're racing down in California. The guys were on the front drilling it. I ended up winning. It was Solano, I believe it was, or San Dimas. I can't remember which one it was. Beginning of the season before Redlands Classic started. And I went over to the director sportif, Ted, and I said, Ted, we're going to win everything. Your guys are fantastic and much stronger than I thought they were. We organized the team. It took me 1-2 races to do, but Primož Roglič should have been able to do that at Paris-Nice, no problem, on day 2, day 3 of Paris-Nice, because it's not difficult to know what level all these fantastic riders that he has in his arsenal of tricks for Bora Hansgrohe. The process isn't needed. The process is for outside the racing. In the racing, it's already set and done. Primož Roglič should know that. And also, when it's all said and done, Primož Roglič, don't wear your undershirt on a stage that's 17 degrees, mountain summit finish. We're talking about 17 Celsius, so 65 degrees Fahrenheit. You don't need to have an undershirt on going up the last final climb of a stage at Dauphiné while you're wearing the race leader's yellow jersey. I know the Italian riders love it. It's like a religion to always wear your jersey. But when you start looking at all those guys that are in that front group, they all had their jerseys unzipped. We know Santiago Buitrago all the way unzipped. And we know even the front 3 riders, Jorgensen, G, and Carlos Rodriguez had their jerseys at least zipped down 1/3 of the way. So Primož Roglič was overdressed. I hope he learns from the process here, not the racecraft, not the ability of his riders and how to use them the most, but I hope he learns his racecraft a little bit sharper, because once he gets into the Tour de France, you cannot afford to make these kind of mistakes as overdressing, possibly dieting, or crashing yourself once the Tour de France starts proper and you're racing against Tadej Pogacar. We need a fantastic 2024 July here coming up. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. I'll bring you some more Beyond the Coverage, of course, before the Tour de France starts proper, and then we're going into the 24 Tour de France, which is going to be epic. So hit the like and subscribe button. I'll see you guys real soon.